My name's Scintilla Chingayipe, and I am pleased to be your MC this morning. I'd like to welcome you all to the launch of the Scanlon Foundation's 2014 Mapping Social Cohesion Report. Before we begin this morning's proceedings, I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land in which we gather this morning, the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge Peter Scanlon, the chair of the Scanlon Foundation, the Honourable Bruce Atkinson, the President of the Legislative Council and the State Member of the Eastern Metropolitan Region, Telmo Languilla, the Shadow Parliamentary Secretary to the Leader of the Opposition and Multicultural Affairs, Has Delau, the Executive Director of the Australian Multicultural Foundation, the Honourable Sir James Gobbo, Joseph Caputo, the Chairman of the Federation of Ethnic Communities Councils of Australia, Chin Tan, the Chair of the Victorian Multicultural Commission, Kate Jenkins, the Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commissioner, and our panellists this morning. The report author, Professor Andrew Marcus, the Assistant Commissioner of Victoria Police, Andrew Crisp, the General Manager of Stakeholder Relations at AIMS, Adam Baxter, lawyer and social justice advocate, Azmina Hussain, and the CEO of the Australian Industry Group, Ines Willix. So if we could just give them a round of applause this morning. Okay, so this morning we will hear the findings of Australia's largest study, monitoring public attitudes on the key issues affecting our social harmony, the Mapping Social Cohesion Report. With more than 24,000 people surveyed since 2007, it certainly provides a robust insight into where we stand as a nation. And as you'll hear today, it provides much content for discussion. On that note, for those on social media, and if you'd like to tweet from the launch this morning, the hashtag is Social Cohesion Report. Now, I'd like to introduce the Honourable Bruce Atkinson, the President of the Legislative Council and the State Member for Eastern Metropolitan Region, to officially open this morning's launch.
Good morning. I notice I've got minus 20 minutes to speak. Can I first of all pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people and their elders past and present, who have been custodians of this great state of Victoria over many thousands of years. And can I extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. Can I apologise to you for our security procedures. Unfortunately, at this time, with the high alerts that are in place and circumstances even in the Canadian Parliament last week where they also would not have expected any untoward incidents, we have had to up our security activity, and one of the issues for us is obviously to have it as a cultural change, because we're not used to this. And so the cultural change of actually making sure that people assess everybody is causing us some difficulties, and I understand this morning particularly there were some school groups that perhaps should not have gone through quite as quickly as you should have. But can I assure you I'm also wearing and having my pass checked every time I enter the building, even though they know me. It is with great pleasure though that I do welcome you to this iconic building, and this is a building that is a building of ideas. It's a building of discussion and debate. It's a building where public policy is put into legislation, or where those people who are making decisions on public policy that doesn't require legislation are nevertheless required to account for their actions and for their plans and programs, and to account for whether or not they are actually meeting the needs of Victorians. Essentially, part of a public policy process is that you do need to make decisions based on fact, based on reliable information, based on the perceptions and indeed the realities of people's experience. And there are many demands on governments And it's often difficult to actually have the wherewithal to establish exactly where people require those services and what quality of services they require. I mean, we can speculate, but very often we miss the mark in terms of government services, and I mean governments of all persuasions, miss the mark because of the information that they have available and the experience that feeds into that public policy. So it is that a report like this, a mapping report like this, is so crucial to in fact informing public policy, to enabling legislators and planners of programs and services to get it right, to get it closer to the mark, to actually realise the aspirations that people have, to meet the needs that people have. And so therefore it is a great pleasure for me to welcome you here for this discussion today on what I regard as a landmark report. It's a great pleasure for me to have the opportunity and the privilege to thank those people who've been part of this exercise and have ensured that this input to public policy, interestingly at a time obviously when we're all focused on elections here in the state government, but this is a report that does not just inform the next 31 days up until that election, but indeed it's a report that can inform many years ahead. And so I congratulate the Scanlon Foundation for the work that it has done in presenting this report. And I ask you, Peter, to convey to everybody, Peter Scanlon, the chair of the Scanlon Foundation who's here today, I ask you to convey to all of those people who've been involved with the report, because there's going to be more than are simply on my list this morning of acknowledgements, our appreciation for the work that you've done. Not our appreciation just as a parliament or as members of parliament, but indeed our appreciation on behalf of all Victorians that we represent for you seeing the importance of this work and for carrying it out, because as I said, it is a landmark report that I think is going to be extraordinarily helpful in terms of developing public policy, shaping programs and services going forward. I am delighted to share the stage this morning and to share the hosting duties, if you like. Whilst I'm the President of the Upper House, I have a shadow, not a shadow minister, but a shadow in terms of somebody who stalks me, and that is Telmo Langwilla. Now, Telmo Langwilla is known to many of you because he is one of the busiest and most effective members of Parliament in this whole multicultural area. He's a person who comes from a Uruguayan background, but indeed is as Aussie as I am, and the only problem with Telmo, apart from the Labor Party affiliation, is that he doesn't vote for Melbourne Football Club. But he is a very fine member, and he and I at every occasion, and indeed our colleagues, always emphasise that here in Victoria we are the luckiest state of the lucky country because of the multicultural community that we have, the fact that it's valued, the fact that it's nurtured, the fact that we work on it, and the fact that it's bipartisan in terms of the approach of the two major political parties, and indeed I dare say the minor parties, particularly the Greens, in terms of supporting what we think is one of our real advantages here in Victoria, being the multicultural community that we have. It would be also remiss of me if I didn't acknowledge several other people, and I'm delighted to welcome Sir James Gobbo, a former Governor of Victoria, Italian descent. I still recall one of his wonderful stories that he regaled members of Parliament with some time ago. By the way, I think I'm now batting minus 25 minutes. But Sir Justice Gobbo was regaled us with a story about how he went out as the governor in early days to go and get a video from the local video shop and had to give his address, and they didn't believe him. He tells the story far better, so over a cup of tea, ask Sir Justice Gobbo for that story, because it's a beauty. Hastalel, Executive Director of the Australian Multicultural Foundation, who does some very fine work here in Victoria. Joseph Caputo, Chairman of the Federation of Ethnic Communities Councils of Australia. Chin Chin Tan is not here yet, I don't think, but is coming to join us this morning from the Victorian Multicultural Commission. Kate Jenkins, the Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commissioner. Of course, our panellist, the report author, Professor Andrew Marcus. And Andrew, we congratulate you on bringing this report together. The work that you've done to synthesise so much important information with your team has been tremendous, and we really congratulate you on that. We are, as a state, indebted to you for that work. Assistant Commissioner, a good friend of mine in the Victoria Police, Andrew Crisp, who has ticked off my security this morning, despite the fact that it was a humbug for the rest of us. The General Manager and Stakeholder Relations for AIMS, Adam Baxter, lawyer and social justice advocate Azmina Hussain, and the CEO of the Australian Industry Group, Ines Willox. I also noticed Eddie Micallef, who is a former member of this place and was a fine member that I worked with some time ago, Marion Lau, and there are many other people in the room who I think deserve to be acknowledged. But there's another one over there, but I won't go on because that's too much. Can I simply close in saying a couple of very quick things? In the past, when many people came to this country, particularly people in the time that Sir James Gobbo and his family came here, no doubt Eddie Micallef's family, Australia had full employment. And I think it was much easier for many migrants to come to Australia and to settle quickly, establish quickly, and realise some of their dreams, which included a home as much as the security and safety of this country. They also had, in many cases, touchstones like the Greek Orthodox Church or the Roman Catholic Church. All of those things made it a bit easier to settle. Today, the challenges are more significant in many ways, because our economy is going through a transitional process, and there is a difference in terms of the sorts of jobs that are available in many cases, and indeed the skill sets that are required for those jobs, and there is difficulties in terms of a lot of people knowing where the economy is going and what the opportunities are going to be going forward in that jobs market. That makes it very difficult for new arrivals to actually find well-paid jobs that will be sustainable going forward, that they have confidence that they can make their investments on behalf of their families going forward. We also have other challenges, and those challenges, of course, are what's happening, the ripple effects of what's happening, maybe in some ways tidal wave effects of what's happening in other parts of the world. As I indicated earlier, we're very proud of our multicultural community here in Victoria, and we do work at it. And at this time, we probably have to work at it even harder than we've had to work at it over the last 4, 5, 10 years. Because right now, with some of the things that are happening in other parts of the world, indeed there are those people who are starting to try and tig the fabric of our multicultural community, who are starting to ask questions about just how effective it is, whether it was the right sort of policy, whether or not we should maintain it, whether or not we should maintain immigration levels, what we should do about the sorts of people that we bring to this country, that we encourage to this country, that we want to attract, whether or not we should be making distinctions between different people. Now in Victoria, we have some very strong views about that, and I think the time is now to defend those views, and very much that defence relies on such documentation, such weaponry as this social mapping report, because it helps us to understand some of the issues confronting people. It helps us to tackle some of the ignorance that underlines those challenges to what we hold and value so dearly here in Victoria. This report is a landmark report. The Scanlon Foundation deserves to be congratulated for this. And all of those people who've been part of the exercise, I extend my congratulations to you and my appreciation to you on behalf of the Victorian Parliament, the government and the people of Victoria for what I think is going to be a report that helps us to defend our multicultural community and indeed to build upon it, upon its successes, and to go forward in the advancement of this state. Thank you for having me this morning, and I'm sorry that I'm now about perhaps 30 minutes overdue. Thank you for your indulgence on that. All the best for today.